Imagine someone gave you a map on the day you were born. At the very end of that map was a single sentence. When you finally get there, you'll be happy. For most of our lives, we never question that promise. We simply choose a destination, graduate from the right university, find the perfect partner, build a successful company, buy the dream house, become financially free, lose the weight, write the book, reach 1 million subscribers. The destination changes, but the promise never does. If I can just get there, then life will finally feel complete. That belief quietly shapes almost every important decision we make. It determines what we sacrifice, how hard we work, what we fear losing, even how we define ourselves. Then one day, something remarkable happens. You actually arrive. The email you've waited years for finally appears. The promotion becomes official. The company succeeds. The audience applauds. The medal hangs around your neck. For a brief moment, everything feels exactly as you imagined. Your heart races. Your mind fills with relief. You smile without trying. This must be what happiness feels like. But then, a week passes, perhaps a month. Life slowly returns to ordinary. The excitement fades. The dream quietly becomes routine. And one evening, without warning, a question appears that almost nobody wants to admit. Why don't I feel different? That question has haunted some of the most successful people who have ever lived. Olympic champions have spoken about unexpected depression after winning gold. Entrepreneurs have described feeling emotionally lost after selling companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Actors spend years dreaming about award ceremonies, only to discover that the morning after winning feels strangely ordinary. Even lottery winners, despite their extraordinary financial transformation, often return surprisingly close to their previous level of happiness within a relatively short period. How is that possible? How can someone spend years chasing a dream, only to discover that reality feels smaller than imagination? Most people answer that question the wrong way. They assume they chose the wrong dream, so they chase another one. A bigger salary, a larger audience, a better relationship, a more impressive achievement, without realizing they're solving the wrong problem. Because the problem isn't the destination. The problem is the promise. Your brain quietly convinced you that achievement and lasting happiness were the same thing. They aren't. And neuroscience explains exactly why. One of the biggest myths in modern psychology is that dopamine is the chemical of happiness. You've probably heard it countless times. Dopamine makes you feel good. It sounds simple. It's also incomplete. If dopamine's primary job were making you happy after success, then achieving your biggest goal should produce permanent satisfaction. But that's not what happens. Researchers now understand that dopamine is much more closely connected to anticipation than possession, to pursuit rather than arrival, to possibility rather than ownership. Imagine two children on Christmas Eve. One is staring at beautifully wrapped presents beneath the tree. The other is opening presents after every gift has already been unwrapped. Which child usually feels more excitement? Surprisingly, the child who hasn't opened anything yet. Expectation often creates stronger emotional activity than possession itself. Your brain becomes fascinated by possibility, not certainty. Scientists sometimes describe this using two separate motivational systems. One controls wanting. The other controls liking. Wanting is the engine. Liking is the reward. The remarkable part. The engine is far larger than the reward. Evolution designed it that way. Because a species that keeps searching survives. A species that becomes permanently satisfied eventually stops moving. Thousands of years ago, a hunter who celebrated yesterday's success for too long might miss tomorrow's meal. A tribe that stopped preparing after one good harvest might not survive the following winter. Nature rewarded movement, not contentment. And although the modern world looks completely different, your nervous system is still running remarkably similar software. That's why your greatest achievements often feel most exciting before they happen. The interview, the proposal, the launch, the competition, the countdown, the possibility. Your brain loves the future because the future still contains uncertainty. And uncertainty is where dopamine does its best work. The moment uncertainty disappears, something else quietly begins. a psychological process so powerful that it changes nearly every human life. Psychologists call it the arrival fallacy. The arrival fallacy is one of the most fascinating ideas in modern psychology. It describes our tendency to believe that happiness permanently exists somewhere in the future. Not today, not here, but there. Always one destination away. As children, we imagine happiness begins when we become adults. As teenagers, we believe it starts after graduation. As adults, we move the finish line again. After the promotion, after buying a house, after getting married, after reaching financial freedom, after retiring. The destination changes. The illusion never does. What's remarkable is that almost everyone believes they're the exception. We look at people who have already achieved what we want and think, they must have figured it out. They finally made it. They're probably happy all the time, but we rarely ask those people what happened after they arrived. If we did, we'd discover something surprisingly consistent. Almost everyone quietly invents another finish line. The entrepreneur who dreamed of earning $1 million now dreams about 10. The athlete who wanted to win one championship begins obsessing over defending the title. The content creator who once dreamed of 100,000 subscribers starts worrying about declining views after reaching 1 million. Yesterday's impossible dream quietly becomes today's ordinary expectation. Not because people are greedy, because the brain keeps updating its definition of normal. Psychologists call this process hedonic adaptation. Imagine walking into a dark room. At first, everything feels unfamiliar. After a few minutes, your eyes adapt. Nothing in the room changed. Your perception did. Happiness works in a remarkably similar way. The first day in your new house feels unforgettable. Months later, you stop noticing the beautiful view outside the window. The promotion that once made you call everyone you loved eventually becomes just another Monday morning. The expensive watch that once felt extraordinary slowly becomes part of getting dressed. The achievement didn't lose value. Your nervous system simply stopped treating it as new. Neuroscientists believe the brain is constantly making predictions about reality. Whenever something is unexpected, the brain pays attention. Whenever something becomes predictable, attention fades. This mechanism is incredibly efficient. If your brain reacted to familiar experiences with the same intensity every single day, you'd quickly become overwhelmed. Instead, it conserves energy by turning extraordinary experiences into ordinary ones. The problem is that we mistake this adaptation for failure. We think, I must have chosen the wrong goal. I need something bigger. I need the next achievement. So we begin running again. And that's where the trap becomes almost invisible. Because the next goal really does create excitement. Planning, imagining, preparing, anticipating. The motivational system comes back to life. You mistake that excitement for proof that the next destination will finally satisfy you. But what you're actually experiencing is the pleasure of pursuit, not the promise of arrival. There's an old story about a fisherman and a businessman. The businessman spends his entire life building a fortune so that one day he can finally relax by the ocean, enjoy slow mornings, spend time with his family, and watch the sunset without worrying about work. The fisherman smiles. That's exactly what I did today. Whether the story is literally true isn't important. Its psychology is. Many people accidentally postpone living because they're busy preparing for a future life that never quite arrives. The brain keeps whispering, just one more achievement, just one more promotion, just one more milestone. And because the voice sounds reasonable, we believe it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If your ability to enjoy life depends entirely on crossing the next finish line, then every finish line will eventually become another starting line. Which leads to an even deeper question. If success isn't enough, then why do some of the world's highest achievers experience profound emptiness immediately after reaching the top? The answer has almost nothing to do with success itself. It has everything to do with identity. Imagine training for the Olympics for 15 years. Every morning begins before sunrise. Every meal is planned. Every vacation is postponed. Every decision answers one question. Will this help me win? Slowly, the goal stops being something you do. It becomes who you are. You are no longer someone preparing for the Olympics. You are an Olympian. Now imagine standing on the podium. The medal is around your neck. Millions of people are watching. You have just accomplished the dream that shaped most of your life. The celebration lasts a few hours. The interviews last a few days. The headlines last a few weeks. Then, everyone goes home. The stadium becomes quiet. The cameras disappear. And for the first time in years, nobody tells you what comes next. Many elite athletes describe this moment as surprisingly painful, not because they failed, because they no longer knew who they were without the goal. Psychologists sometimes call this an identity vacuum. For years, your identity was built around becoming someone. Then suddenly, you became that person. Now what? This pattern appears far beyond sports. Entrepreneurs spend 20 years building one company. The company is sold. Financially, life has never been better. Psychologically, many feel completely lost. Actors spend years dreaming about winning awards. When they finally do, some describe an unexpected emotional silence. Students dedicate most of their youth to one examination. Graduation arrives. Instead of freedom, they feel strangely directionless. The problem isn't that achievement disappoints us. The problem is that achievement often removes the structure that gave our lives meaning. Goals organize time. They organize habits. They organize attention. Most importantly, they organize identity. When the goal disappears, the structure disappears with it. Your brain suddenly loses the story it has been telling itself every day. And human beings need stories, not fictional stories, personal stories. Psychologists who study narrative identity argue that we understand our lives through ongoing narratives. I'm building something. I'm becoming stronger. I'm overcoming this challenge. Those stories give suffering a purpose. A difficult workout feels meaningful because it belongs to a larger story. A sleepless night feels worthwhile because it moves you closer to something important. But once the story reaches its final page, silence follows. Many people mistake that silence for failure. It isn't. It's simply the space between two identities. Unfortunately, most people become uncomfortable with that space. Instead of understanding it, they rush to fill it. Another promotion, another business, another milestone, another impossible target. Not because they truly want it, but because standing still forces them to ask a frightening question. If I'm no longer chasing success, who am I? That question is far more uncomfortable than working another 80-hour week. So the cycle begins again. Achievement, celebration, adaptation, emptiness, another goal, another chase. From the outside, it looks like ambition. From the inside, it can become escape. Which brings us to perhaps the biggest misunderstanding of all. Maybe human beings were never designed to build their lives around achievement. Maybe achievement was only supposed to be one part of something much larger. Because when psychologists began studying the happiest people across different cultures, they discovered something remarkable. The people who reported the deepest life satisfaction weren't always the wealthiest, or the most famous, or the most successful. They had built their lives around something achievement alone could never provide: meaning. So what actually creates lasting fulfillment? For decades, psychologists searched for the answer. They expected happiness to increase simply with wealth, status, or achievement. It didn't. Beyond a certain point, more success produced surprisingly little additional life satisfaction. Something else mattered far more. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan spent years studying what keeps human beings motivated over the long term. Their work eventually became known as self-determination theory. It suggests that lasting well-being depends on three psychological needs. The first is autonomy, the feeling that your life belongs to you, not to your parents, not to society, not to social media, not to other people's expectations. Many people achieve goals they never actually chose. They spend years climbing a ladder, only to discover it was leaning against someone else's wall. The second need is competence. Notice something important. Competence is different from achievement. Achievement is reaching a destination. Competence is becoming more capable. One ends. The other never has to. A pianist doesn't continue practicing because every concert changes the world. A scientist doesn't keep learning because every experiment becomes famous. A great teacher doesn't teach because every student becomes extraordinary. They continue because growth itself becomes rewarding. The third need is relatedness. Human beings were never designed to experience success alone. A promotion means very little if there's nobody waiting to celebrate with you. A beautiful house feels strangely empty if it never becomes a home. Even extraordinary accomplishments lose their emotional impact when they aren't connected to people who matter. Then researchers discovered another fascinating psychological state: flow. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described flow as those rare moments when you become completely absorbed in what you're doing. Hours pass unnoticed. Your attention becomes effortless. You stop thinking about yourself. Ironically, flow almost never happens after achieving the goal. It happens while working towards something meaningful, while writing, while painting, while building, while solving, while teaching, while learning. The happiest moments of life often aren't found at the finish line. They're hidden inside the climb. Perhaps that's why older people rarely describe the happiest years of their lives by listing achievements. Instead, they remember conversations, friendships, adventures, people they loved, challenges they overcame, moments that changed who they became. Memory quietly teaches us something achievement often hides. Meaning lasts longer than excitement. Excitement is emotional. Meaning is existential. Excitement asks, how do I feel right now? Meaning asks, who am I becoming? Those are completely different questions, and they lead to completely different lives. So perhaps the biggest mistake isn't chasing ambitious goals. The mistake is expecting those goals to permanently complete you. No achievement was ever designed to carry that weight. Not money, not fame, not success, not recognition. They can change your circumstances. They cannot permanently satisfy a brain that evolved to keep searching. But here's the beautiful part. You are not trapped inside that programming. Awareness changes behavior. Once you understand why the finish line keeps moving, you stop blaming yourself every time happiness fades. Instead of asking, why don't I feel successful enough? You begin asking, what kind of life is worth waking up for? That single question changes everything. Because goals eventually end. Projects finish. Businesses are sold. Careers end. Records are broken. Even the greatest achievements eventually become memories. But curiosity doesn't have to end. Learning doesn't have to end. Contribution doesn't have to end. Growth doesn't have to end. Perhaps the happiest people were never the ones who reached the highest mountain. Perhaps they were the ones who discovered that life was never about reaching one summit. It was about becoming the kind of person who never loses the desire to climb with purpose. One day, you'll achieve another dream. The excitement will fade again. When it does, don't panic. Nothing has gone wrong. Your brain is simply doing what it evolved to do. Smile. Celebrate the victory. Rest for a while. Then choose another mountain. Not because you believe happiness is waiting at the top, but because every meaningful climb quietly transforms the person making the journey. And in the end, that person is the greatest achievement you'll ever create.